Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's great to be here with the Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services, Mike Ellis, Chief Bob Andrews from the Alberta Sheriffs, and Angela Kemp from the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team, or ALERT, to discuss security at the Canada-US border. Today, Alberta's government is taking immediate action to crack down on illegal activities at our shared Alberta-US border, namely illegal migrants and the trafficking of drugs and guns. This suite of measures will curb illegal border activities and strengthen our nation's border security. We're investing $29 million to create a new unit, the Interdiction Patrol Team, or IPT, under the command of the Alberta Sheriffs. This unit will be supported by over 50 specially trained sheriffs. 4 drug patrol dogs, critical to ensure reasonable suspicion to search vehicles. 10 cold weather surveillance drones that can operate in high winds with dedicated pilots. And 4 narcotics analyzers to test for illicit drugs. The IPT will be made up of 7 teams of sheriffs. We will also create a 2-kilometer deep border zone, which is a red zone deemed critical infrastructure to enable the sheriffs to arrest individuals found attempting to cross the border illegally or attempting to traffic illegal drugs or weapons without needing a warrant. The criminals behind these activities destroy lives on both sides of the border, and these measures are our way of stopping it. It doesn't mean that Alberta intends or wants to act alone when it comes to securing the border. We'll obviously keep working closely with our federal counterparts at the Canada Border Services Agency, as well as the RCMP. We will start filling the ranks of the border teams as soon as possible. Our goal is to have the Interdiction Patrol Unit up and running by early next year. Together with federal law enforcement, we'll ensure that our section of the American border is well protected. We'll deny safe haven to criminals looking to operate in both countries. And if we succeed and maintain proper border security, I expect we will have a very strong relationship with the United States, as we always have. Now I'd like to invite Minister Mike Ellis forward to share more details about the new unit.
Well, thank you very much, Premier. I am Mike Ellis. I am the Deputy Premier and Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services. I want to thank everyone here for joining us today, including, of course, Chief Bob Andrews of the Alberta Sheriffs, Inspector Angela Kemp of the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Teams. Look, we all know that the border that we share with our neighbours to the south is a great source of economic activity, prosperity for our province. We know that Alberta's border with the United States is vast, a full 298 kilometres in fact, and there are significant landmass between each official port of entry, and more resources are needed to sufficiently patrol all of that space. Any gaps in coverage are exploited by organized criminals, drug traffickers, illicit gun dealers, and other criminals, and all to the detriment of the public safety on both sides of the border. It gives rise to issues like human trafficking, illegal guns, and other gang-related activities, which leads to violence and illicit drugs like fentanyl flooding our streets. The fentanyl crisis, of which I was the first politician in Canada to call for action, to recognize that we had an opioid crisis, and this is why I came forward with legislation in 2016, which was the Pill Press Bill. I've continued to sound the alarm on the increased border security since I took the role in public safety as a public safety minister. As the Premier stated, the new Interdiction Patrol Team is our proactive response to border safety. The new teams will be made up of 51 officers with specialized training. They'll be placed on strategically deployed to patrol locations, and they're going to focus on commercial vehicle inspection stations on the main highways. There'll be canine units, which will also be part of the teams, as well as 10 surveillance drones to monitor the border. These drones will be able to cover large areas of the border and are operable in cold weather and strong winds. The sheriff teams will also set up vehicle inspection stations near border entry points to stop illicit trafficking of guns, drugs, and people. And simply, we want to make sure that we're part of the solution and not the problem. Sheriff teams will be tasked with ramping up security along the Alberta-US border, cracking down on illegal cross-border activity. Operationally, they'll work closely with the RCMP's Federal Policing Service. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to meet with the Canada Border Services Agency and the RCMP, where we were able to share the plan with them. I'm happy to say that we all agreed that there was a strong agreement that the importance of collaboration towards a shared goal of a secured border. The Alberta Sheriffs have agreed and have already been doing a great job at augmenting and supporting local law enforcement, and I know that we'll do the same with the new Interdiction Patrol Team. The Interdiction Patrol Team will primarily focus on securing Alberta's border with the United States, Montana, and will also provide coverage to major provincial highways and known interprovincial travel routes leading and from these areas. The teams are well trained and will be equipped to the state-of-the-art equipment to take on this new function. And this specialized interdiction training helps law enforcement identify specific indicators of drug smuggling and human trafficking and provides them with the tools to identify these criminals. I'd also like to highlight the work of Attorney General Minister Amory, who is doing some work to add to the border security. Alberta's government will create a border red zone by amending the regulations under the Critical Infrastructure Defence Act. The zone will be at least 2 kilometers deep and will be designated as essential infrastructure. This will enable law enforcement to arrest individuals found committing an offence under the Act, and this will enable us to further protect our borders. Alberta's government will also examine options to assert provincial jurisdiction over the prosecution of drug charges related to the Canada-U.S. border. To be clear, there will be strict provincial punishment for drug dealers. I'll let Chief Andrews delve into the team specifics on the Sheriff's teams, but let me conclude by saying this. Today's announcement represents a strong investment from Alberta's government that reflects the seriousness with which we're treating this current situation. No amount of crime is acceptable along Alberta's border or anywhere else in our province, for that matter. And while we work with our federal and international partners to address this issue, we will not sit idly by and wait for a solution to be handed to us. It's the Alberta way to take initiative and set an example for the rest of the country. So let's let today's announcement be crystal clear and a message to all illegal drugs and illegal drug dealers that you are not welcome here in this province. As the Premier and I have stated many times before, that we will do whatever it takes to keep Albertans safe, and we will also do anything necessary to protect our borders to ensure this safety. We're taking a zero tolerance stance on this issue, full stop. And with that, I'd like to thank and welcome Chief Andrews to the podium to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Ellis. Good morning, everyone. As has been mentioned, monitoring the nearly 300-kilometer Alberta-Montana border is a task requiring a coordinated and specialized approach. Patrolling busy corridors, remote back roads, and areas in between official border crossings demands a presence capable of enforcement across a vast and challenging landscape. Collaboration with our federal partners in the RCMP and Canada Border Services Agency will be key to for the interdiction team, patrol team's success in confronting cross-border illegal activity. Alberta Sheriffs will work closely with both of these agencies as we deploy sheriffs and stand up the interdiction patrol teams. This partnership will allow for real-time intelligence and sharing with our sharing partners on both sides of the border. In particular, the team will work closely with the RCMP's federal policing services, which already monitors areas along the Alberta-U.S. border between official ports of entry. Access to federal and international border intelligence will ensure these teams have an immediate impact on the trafficking of people, drugs, and guns between Alberta and the United States. In terms of organizational structure, the Interdiction Patrol Team will be situated within Sheriff Highway Patrol and will consist of 51 new members. Their strategic deployment will ensure the Interdiction Patrol Team is strongly positioned to pool resources in response to imminent cross-border illegal activity. They will gather and share intelligence to help target areas of potential vulnerability where they can intercept people and vehicles suspected of carrying out illegal activities. Members of the unit will be authorized under federal legislation, which includes the Criminal Code, the Cannabis Act, the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, the Identification of Criminals Act, the Federal Motor Vehicle Transport Act, along with all relevant provincial acts and regulations. Already, 32 sheriffs have taken the RCMP interdiction training. This has formed a basis for a smooth and efficient interagency communication and collaboration moving forward. We're also ensuring the interdiction teams have the necessary tools to do the job. Specialized equipment, including all-weather surveillance drones, off-highway vehicles, thermal and night vision optical gear, and drug and chemical identification systems, will provide essential support for the sheriffs in this multifaceted role. Crime does not respect borders. Our interdiction patrol team will have the training and resources they need to do their part in maintaining a cohesive and highly responsive cross-border enforcement strategy with our partners. I want to thank the Premier and Minister Ellis for having faith in the Alberta Sheriffs to take a pivotal role in this important initiative. As has been mentioned, strong partnerships with federal and American law enforcement are essential for the interdiction team's success. This will be part of a comprehensive and seamless approach to international border security, keeping people and communities safe on both sides of the border. Thank you. I will now invite Inspector Kemp from Alberta Law Enforcement Response Teams to the podium.
Thank you, Chief. ALERT is made up of the province's most sophisticated policing resources and is an integration between the Calgary Police Service, the Edmonton Police Service, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and the Alberta Sheriffs. ALERT is funded by the Alberta government and is the province's response to serious and organized crime. Organized crime is the driving force behind the fentanyl trade, and ALERT has been at the forefront of disrupting fentanyl in the province. ALERT's integrated and specialized enforcement teams has seized over 250,000 fentanyl pills, has seized nearly 90 kilograms of fentanyl powders, and has seized a literal ton of fentanyl precursors and buffing agents. From the very first fentanyl seizure in the province in 2013 to the recent dismantling of the fentanyl superlab in Valley View, ALERT has been leaders in disrupting the fentanyl trade and putting drug dealers in jail. ALERT is responsible for some of the largest fentanyl seizures in the province, and we have worked tirelessly towards getting harmful substances off our streets, tackling this issue from all fronts. This is an all-hands-on-deck approach, and fentanyl, as we know, is a crisis in law enforcement that we have never seen. As a result, fentanyl has changed the landscape of organized crime, putting record profits in the hands of criminals, meanwhile indiscriminately killing thousands of Albertans. I offer my sympathies to the friends and family members who have lost loved ones due to this crisis, and the unfortunate reality is that fentanyl has negatively affected everyone. It's a poison that has spread to every corner of our province, and no one has been immune. The police have said many times that we are unable to arrest our way out of this problem. While that is true, we will remain nimble and work together as law enforcement partners. We will continue to collaborate to find new solutions and forge alliances to combat fentanyl. Regardless of what uniform we wear, what agency we represent, we will aggressively target drug dealers, disrupt the fentanyl trade in this province, and keep our communities safe.
Thank you. Oh. And with that, we're going to head into our media Q&A. Please state your name and outlet before asking your question. You'll get one question, one follow-up. We'll start off here in the room before making our way to the phones, and we'll start with our first at the mic.
Hi there, for the Premier, Michael King, Global News. If the Canada-U.S. border is as big of a problem as you say it is, why did it take a threat from President-elect Donald Trump to put this plan into place?
I think I've mentioned to the media many times that if you want to know the agenda of our government, you should read the mandate letters that I have given to my ministers. And I'll quote to you from the July 2023 mandate letter: create a specialized sheriff-led anti-fentanyl and illegal gun trafficking team or teams, including at the Canada-U.S. border. So the reason we're able to get started, accelerate this plan, is because we've been working on it for 18 months. It's the reason why we already have a number of officers that have been trained. And we are going to be accelerating the acquisition of equipment. But this has been in the works for some time.
For either the Minister or the Chief, what can people expect with this 2-kilometer critical border zone as they're driving down? Do they expect to be stopped in that 2-kilometer zone before they get to the border? How's that going to look, and when's it going to be in place?
You can supplement me, but look, there's 6 access points into from the United States into Canada through the Montana border. And if you're just in a regular vehicle and you're driving down, you're going to get stopped at the CBSA border crossing, which is what is normally happening. The intelligence from a lot of our law enforcement community is that a lot of these illicit drugs, illegal guns, human trafficking are coming through commercial vehicles. So the vehicle inspection station will be for commercial vehicles, and this is why these officers don't just have interdiction training. All of these sheriffs also have commercial vehicle training as well to look for what they need to stop the flow of illegal drugs, illegal guns, and of course the human trafficking that has been occurring across our borders. In regards to the spaces in between the border crossing, which is the vast space that the chief had mentioned there, that's where you're going to see patrols and drones and working very much in collaboration with the RCMP. And certainly if there are illegal migrants either coming from the United States into Canada or vice versa, then certainly, as the Premier mentioned in her comments, you have to have, police need to have reasonable suspicion in order to stop somebody. And this just provides additional grounds regarding reasonable suspicion to stop and question and ask, why are you in the middle of this field, traveling to and from when you're not going through a legal entryway either to or from the United States and Canada? I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that. No, we're fine.
Perfect.
Good morning, Premier. Jen Hodson for the Western Standard. What do you make of Doug Ford's vow to cut off energy to the U.S. in the wake of the 25% tariff threats?
Well, let me be clear from the Alberta perspective. Under no circumstances will Alberta agree to cut off oil and gas exports. We don't support tariffs. I don't support tariffs on Canadian goods, and I don't support tariffs on U.S. goods, because all it does is make life more expensive for everyday Canadians and everyday Americans. So instead, we're taking a diplomatic approach, and we're meeting with our allies in the U.S. We're making the case for Alberta oil and gas to be part of the solution to energy affordability, to energy security, and to, generally speaking, North American defense security as well. And of course, we'll work with our counterparts in Montana in a shared border arrangement so that we can improve public safety, crack down on illegal migrants and illegal drug trafficking. And that's part of the reason why we're announcing this today. We know that there are issues that have been identified that are irritants to the current administration. We've identified those as a problem in Alberta as well. We're accelerating our plan, but that is our approach, is one of diplomacy, not threats.
And Rachel Notley just announced her resignation as MLA from Edmonton Strathcona. Would you be willing to comment on that? Yeah,
I mean, she was Premier for 4 years, and she was one of our longest-serving members of the Legislative Assembly. I think when you look at the support that she got in her community during elections, people felt very well represented by her. So I'll look forward to seeing what her next steps are.
Thank you.
Heather Yorks West, Global National. Thanks for taking my question. So if retaliatory oil and gas tariffs are off the table, what about other sectors? Is there anything further that your government would consider?
Well, just think about what retaliatory tariffs look like, and use the examples that the Prime Minister gave. Ketchup and playing cards and bourbon and cherries. So what that would mean is that cherries for Canadian consumers are 25% more expensive. Playing cards for Canadian consumers are 25% more expensive. Bourbon for Canadian consumers are 25% more expensive. So that's what is being contemplated here, is making life more expensive for Canadians. I don't think that that's the right approach. When I was down in the U.S. at the Western Governors Conference, what I said is that there is a substantial amount of oil and gas that goes across the border. In fact, it's somewhere in the order of $133 billion worth of trade on oil, and somewhere near $22 billion worth of trade on natural gas, and also lubricants and other products that come from petroleum. If all of those have a 25% tariff, it'll make life more expensive for American consumers. Some of the analysis we've seen is that a 25% tariff would would add $1 a gallon to every gallon of gasoline that Americans purchase. And I don't think that when I mentioned that to all of the governors that I spoke with, their eyes went wide. They know what that would mean. And so I think that that is the better road, is for us to talk about why it is we have such a robust and strong mutual relationship on trade that works very well for both countries. And that's the approach we're taking.
And assuming this border plan came up during your meeting with the premiers yesterday, what was their reaction, and are any other provinces considering similar measures? Would you encourage that?
The Prime Minister has taken note that other provinces have been talking about doing something similar to this. Quebec is talking about deploying some of their provincial police force, same with Ontario. Wabkanu in Manitoba has talked about deploying some of his conservation officers, who I think are very well trained as well. And so they have a plan that they shared with us, and they'll be rolling it out, I'm sure, in due course. I was pleased to see that they wanted to get the provincial buy-in on the approach that they're taking, and I was glad to see that it's very much consistent with what we're doing. As Mike mentioned, he's already reached out to his counterparts in border security as well as with the RCMP. So we're well on our way, and I'll look forward to seeing what the federal government rolls out in other provinces.
Thank you.
Hello, Laurence Tachereau with Radio Canada. My first question would be for Inspector Kim. Can you precise detail about the numbers? You said that the fentanyl that was seized, is it coming from out of Canada, coming from the U.S. to Canada? Can you detail a bit more about those amounts?
Yeah, thank you. The majority of fentanyl that we're seeing is being manufactured in Western Canada, and the precursors we are seeing being imported from transnational locations.
Okay, so the amount you mentioned were all coming from Canada to the States?
No. The amount that was seized were from locations within Alberta.
Okay. And my second question would be for Premier Smith. The plan that you detailed today, is that something that was mentioned yesterday at the Premier's meeting to Justin Trudeau and all the other premiers?
The Prime Minister and the premiers were well aware that we were announcing a border plan. It was actually the Prime Minister who mentioned that our initiatives as well as the others. I know that Minister Ellis is in regular touch with his federal counterpart, and we've been in touch with the RCMP and Border Services. So we'll be looking forward to seeing if there are other ways that we can integrate. But what we've said from the beginning is that we're prepared to work with our federal counterparts on any initiatives that they have, and they've got some things that are in the works. I think that you'll see more from them on the December 16th budget. They have a process that they have to go through in order to get the allocation of the dollars. We had a process we needed to go through to get the allocation of the dollars, and so I would expect that you'll see a little bit more detail about the federal plan on December 16th. But having gone through our process, this is what we're announcing today.
So yesterday's meeting kind of speed things up.
Mike was intending to have this go through the budget process and be announced in March, and so we were able to accelerate that through Treasury Board, and that's the reason we're able to announce it early. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Bill Graveland from Canadian Press. Minister Ellis?
Yeah.
I'm curious if there's been a single case that you can think of illegal migrants coming across the Alberta border. It's not Manitoba or Quebec where people can just sort of wander across. I'm just curious if it's a problem.
Well, part of what we're doing is to focus on the drugs, right? The drugs and the illegal guns and the human trafficking. And as I said in a previous press conference, it's a two-way street here, right? Sure, the president-elect had indicated his concerns regarding fentanyl that might be coming from Canada into the United States. Again, that's why the Premier put in my mandate letter in regards to making sure that we're shoring up the border of the United States. You know, this is why the Premier has had a conversation with the Governor. This is why I'm going to be having a conversation with the Attorney General in Montana. We want to make sure that the border is to shore it up, to make sure that illegal guns, illegal drugs, illegal human trafficking is coming across the border. In regards to a specific case regarding somebody walking across the border, I mean, you know, I would only be speculating at that particular point. Our focus in this particular case has to do with the illegal guns, illegal drugs, and human trafficking is coming across the border.
Our initiative with Paul Brandt to show how serious human
Yeah, I mean, human trafficking is nothing that we're going to be doing an announcement tomorrow, just so that everybody know this as well. But this is why we have the Center to Combat Human Trafficking, right? I mean, this is something that is occurring. Are there people that are coming across the border, unfortunately, you know, being used in some sort of, we'll say used and abused in some sort of negative way? Yeah, that is happening, right? And that's why we in Alberta are taking this so seriously. But we also have people that are being smuggled across from Canada into the United States, again, from a human trafficking perspective. And so all of this, in my opinion, as a former law enforcement officer, is outrageous. This is stuff that needs to stop. It's something that in a civilized society that we're not going to allow. And I got to thank the folks in alerts. I have to thank the folks in the sheriffs. I have to thank all of our folks in all of our policing services right now, because they're really doing the best that they can. And that's why the Premier and I have been very clear that we're going to do whatever it takes to keep Albertans safe. And this is just another example of that.
I'm curious about, this would obviously have to be a 24-hour-a-day operation, since people would probably be more likely to sneak across under the cover of darkness.
Yeah, yes, it will be a 24-hour operation. This is why we're going to have the 51 officers. This is why we're going to be making sure we're collaborating and working with our RCMP friends. This is why, you know, we're going to continue to have conversations with our friends on the other side of the border, again, to make sure that that any of this illegal activity is not occurring right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll take one more here from the room, and then we'll go to the phones.
Okay. Premier Smith, please. There's a new Angus Reid pulled out about ratings, approval ratings for premiers. And how would you say about your rating? I believe it's 45%. I believe it's 45%. I think you're sitting 7th out of 9 premiers.
Oh, well, I'm holding steady. I think it's been about the same since I got elected, and I think that's a demonstration that when you campaign on doing things and then you do them, people will support you. So I'm glad to see that.
Okay. And Minister Ellis, just a follow-up, please. Maybe this is going to be more of what you're going to speak about tomorrow, but when you mentioned human trafficking, because these will be focused on commercial vehicle stops to combat the fentanyl and the guns, is that also where you're seeing human trafficking through the commercial vehicles?
That's one of them. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, I don't want to get into the specific details, but, you know, I would just say that certainly some of the intelligence that we're getting from law enforcement communities, I mean, there's various ways to smuggle people across the border for nefarious purposes. One of them is through commercial vehicles. Some are not through commercial vehicles. And of course, again, this is part of the collaboration and work we'll be doing with the RCMP and the CBSA. You know, there's specific training that Mr. Brandt and his group have for law enforcement right across this country, quite frankly, to look at what the indicators are. So, you know, again, without getting into great detail, if you have somebody that is in a vehicle, you know, when you're as a CBSA agent, as an example, you need to be looking for signs that person may not be there on their free will, right? And so these are things that are part of the training. So yeah, commercial vehicles is one way. There are various other ways to smuggle people. Airports, this is why Mr. Brandt's done a lot of stuff at airports right across this country, and hoping, as well as the United States as well, he's hoping to get into, because there's just various ways to smuggle people.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We'll head over to the phones now. Operator, could you put through our first caller, please?
Sure. The first question is from David Staples from the Edmonton Journal. Please go ahead.
Thanks for taking my call. Premier, Justin Trudeau has been addressing the border dispute, trade dispute this week, and in a major statement in Halifax, he didn't once address the major U.S. concerns put forward by Donald Trump about illegal fentanyl and migrants. And instead, he's been scolding American voters for not electing Kamala Harris and not adopting progressive policies. What do you think of Trudeau's messaging to Trump so far, public messaging so far to Trump on this tariff border dispute issue?
It's not helpful, and I mentioned that on our call yesterday. I think the American people voted pretty decisively for the Republicans and for President-elect Donald Trump in particular. And as a trading partner and ally of the United States, I respect their vote, and I look forward to working with the new administration on our shared concerns.
Steve Verhoeven, who led Canada's negotiations, I understand from 2017 to 2021, was quoted as saying that he thinks there's a possibility food and oil and gas would be exempted from the Trump tariffs. But he's suggesting, in retaliation, to get the Americans to drop the tariffs on other products, Canadian products as well, that we would impose an export levy. Canada would impose an export levy on oil and gas. What do you think of what he's suggesting?
It's a terrible idea. As you know, as the owner of oil and gas, think about what that would mean. So $122 billion worth of trade coming out of Alberta, a 25% tariff on that, which, if my math is right, would be $30 billion, which would then go to Ottawa. So if you think I would be supportive of that, I must tell you, in no uncertain terms, that would not be on. I would say that what we need to do is address the serious concerns that the U.S. administration has identified, which are our shared concerns, the border, fentanyl in particular, the opioid death crisis as well. We have a great plan in Alberta with rolling out our recovery-oriented system of care that we would love to see rolled out in federal penitentiaries, as it's been rolled out in our provincial corrections facilities, as well as more broadly seeing recovery communities built across the country. We think those are the kind of things that really get to the heart of addressing it. I also mentioned to the Prime Minister, I think he should accelerate the efforts to get to 2% of GDP spent on defense. Because I think that 2032 is also probably not going to be acceptable to our American friends and allies when it comes to the significant national and international security issues that we face. But I would say our best strategy would be this, that we recognize that we provide America with a lot of the raw materials and component parts that help to fuel their industry. We've got various goods that go back and forth across the border, whether it's oil from here that goes to U.S. refineries that comes back into Canada as finished product, or whether it's beef that goes into the U.S. and then comes back into Canada as finished product. You can say the same thing for forestry. You can say the same thing on component parts for manufacturing. You can say the same thing on plastics. That's the education that I think that we need to make sure that our American counterparts understand, is that this mutual trade relationship is mutual and beneficial. And so I would be wanting to lead with how we can get more of our product into the United States, particularly on the energy front. We know that the Americans are going to continue on a growth path, and they need to have reliable partners of heavy oil. The other options are places like Iran and Iraq and Venezuela. And I think we can make a very good case about why it is that we should be the preferred export partner. So I'm all in favor of doing whatever we can to eliminate tariffs on all sides. So both on American goods and Canadian goods, and let's talk about our shared interests. I think that's where we need to start.
Thank you, David. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
The next question is from Tyler Dawson from the National Post. Please go ahead.
Good morning, either for the Premier or Public Safety Minister. The announcement in the press release mentions warrantless searches or arrests without a warrant within that 2-kilometer zone. Like, people live within that 2-kilometer zone. Are homeowners and farmers and property owners at risk of warrantless searches because of this?
No. Look, you have to give some law enforcement folks a little bit of credit here. Look, I mean, if you're somebody who lives in the area, if you're somebody who's a homeowner, somebody who's farmer, as an example, sure. I mean, you go about, live your life, and there shouldn't be any issues. But if you are somebody who is wandering in the middle of nowhere, walking, carrying something illicit, as an example. Certainly, there is reasonable suspicion to have a question and say, hi, what are you doing out here? And if you can't explain that to law enforcement, again, the very simple and lowest threshold is reasonable suspicion to enter into that conversation. Then you have to allow the investigation to take place. But to make it sound as though that there's going to be a ton of warrantless searches going on, quite frankly, is not correct.
That's good to know. I imagine people down there still remember the high-level stuff, so it's good to have some clarity on that. Other question I wanted to ask was, you mentioned, or sorry, the Premier had mentioned that there's been discussion with other provinces. Has there been any sort of direct coordination with our immediate neighbours, either British Columbia or Saskatchewan, about coordinating with them on their sections of the border?
So we're open to that conversation. I would just say that the Premier, and she's more than capable of speaking to this, but I would say that, you know, obviously she let the other premiers know what was occurring, and maybe I'll allow her to expand on that.
We announced that we were going to be going in this direction a couple of weeks ago. As I mentioned, Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba have similar plans. We may just be able to announce it earlier because we started on this back in July of last year, and so we were able to accelerate our plans. I have had a conversation with Montana Governor Giannaforte, and I've asked my public safety minister to coordinate with their Attorney General, which is the equivalent position in the U.S., in order to be able to make sure that we've got cross-border collaboration and information sharing. I've suggested that we get together for a summit with the Montana governor, and he seems amenable to that. We have to pin down a date in the new year to be able to do that. And in addition, I have mentioned that to Premier David Eby as well as Premier Scott Moe, that they may wish to attend, because if you look at Montana, it is the largest border state bordering the Canadian border. North Dakota is pretty large too, but Montana covers all of Alberta, a little bit of BC, as well as Saskatchewan. So it will require a shared effort with Saskatchewan and British Columbia as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Tyler. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
The next question is from Lisa Johnson from Canadian Press. Please go ahead.
Thanks for taking my question. I know, Premier, you mentioned that this has been the plan for some time, and you pointed to the mandate letter from last June, I think. But I'm wondering if you could offer some clarity, like how does this differ from what you had in mind when you wrote that in the mandate letter? We only have the kind of one sentence, not a whole lot of details in the mandate letter, but you mentioned this is an acceleration of the plan. Is it just a matter of speeding up the timeline, or does this differ from what you had in mind originally? Is it an expansion, for example?
I'll let Mike talk to that, but there have been a number of specialized teams that we've been rolling out, as you've seen, over the last short while here. We have scan teams that are surveillance teams on drug houses, and they almost every week, I think, are announcing a new drug house that they're shutting down. We have our surveillance teams that work in collaboration with that. We've got our fugitive apprehension teams, really successful rollout of that at the end of December last year. I think we announced some very positive responses in being able to arrest the worst criminals. There was a good example of our coordination with RCMP Edmonton Police Service and our sheriffs in the north. I think we were able to identify 1,000 of the worst bad guys and do a blitz over 2 weeks to apprehend them. And then we opened up another fugitive apprehension team in the south related to that. So we've been putting these different pieces in place. In addition, Mike has been working to accelerate the training. There's been a bunch of additional training that had to occur in order to be able to bring the sheriffs up to a point where they could collaborate as equals with their policing counterparts. So I'll let Mike talk about what has happened over the last 18 months on this file in particular.
Yeah, thank you, Premier. Yes, I mean, we had already, as the chief mentioned, I mean, we have officers, 32 officers that are trained for interdiction training. You know, almost all of our officers, we'll say at least in the Highway Patrol, have commercial vehicle training. So we had already done a lot of pre-planning here. You know, we had a Treasury Board meeting yesterday, quite frankly, for which I presented. And, you know, obviously the only thing that was accelerated was that we just made sure that we had the comprehensive plan, which includes all of the specialized equipment. But as far as the training of the officers and the when they would be deployed and stuff like that. As the Premier mentioned, we were looking around the March type of area. So this was always part of the plan. But with the great work that's being done by the sheriffs, and of course in collaboration with our friends in the CVSA and the RCMP, we were able to accelerate that plan where we can look at a form of deployment in quite frankly early January.
And do you have a follow-up, Lisa?
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, it's still a little bit unclear to me whether you were going to do this regardless of Mr. Trump's concerns. It was just a matter of time. But my follow-up question is...
well, the simple answer is yes.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Simple answer is yes. We were going to do this regardless of what President-elect Trump said. Thank you. But you can ask your other question.
Thank you, Minister. Just in regards to Ms. Notley, Premier, I'm wondering specifically, will you call a by-election in time for Mr. Nenshi to take the Edmonton-Strathcona seat in time for him to join the spring sitting of the legislature?
I don't know what the leader of the NDP's intentions are. He chose not to run in the most recent by-election that we're having on December 18th. I waited as long as I could to see if somebody would step down for him so that we could hold the two of them together. No one did, so I guess we'll have to wait and see. It's news to me. Early today, I guess, was the decision. We've got Christmas season now. We've got planning for our spring session. And so we've got a nomination process that we have to go through. Presumably, if he doesn't run, they'll have a nomination process that they have to go through there. So I don't want to prejudge that. I guess I'll just have to wait and see what his intentions are.
Thank you, Lisa. We have time for one last question from the phones, and we'll try and come back here in person for the last question. Operator, could you put through the next caller, please?
The next question is from Siobhan Salsay. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my question. Also for the Premier, and on that note of Rachel Notley's resignation, obviously Edmonton Strathcona has been a long-held NDP seat. What's your party's strategy to try to secure that?
I'll have to talk to my campaign manager about that. My campaign team is currently working to win a seat in Lethbridge West, so haven't given any thought to what we might do in Edmonton Strathcona.
Okay, and as a follow-up, I think this one would be best suited for Minister Ellis. I'm hoping to ask about the security guard who was killed while working alone here in Edmonton. Wondering if there are any conversations about changes that are needed to improve the security for those the security guards working alone, if there's any need for enhanced training or what you're considering.
Well, look, first of all, I used to be a security guard. So my heart goes out to that family and anyone who's been affected by this. Look, I haven't had a report back from the department as to any sort of recommendations, but I will say this. This is why I always say, every time, regardless of a municipality or somebody thinks that the solution is a security guard, I have to tell you that it's not. When we're talking about potential risk for people in very concerning circumstances, this is why you need people with specialized training. You need, at the minimum, peace officers, but I always prefer that we need police officers. This is why we are trying to accelerate and do whatever we can to get more police officers in the province of Alberta to help and augment and support and do what we can. This is why the Premier had us deploy officers into downtown Calgary, downtown Edmonton, in high crime areas. This is why that we have funded, as an Alberta government, 50 new police officers in Calgary and Edmonton. So look, it's a dangerous. Look, all of it's been dangerous. Whether I was a police officer, whether a security guard, these are all things that where there is a form of risk. I will look forward to the recommendations and what my department is going to say, but I will say this. This is why we should never, ever defund the police. This is why we always make sure that we, as the Premier has said, and I have said many times before, we will do whatever it takes to keep Albertans safe, and that's why we will continue to support our law enforcement right throughout this province.
Thank you. And we'll go to our last question at the mic here.
Hi, Josh McLean, CBC News. My questions will be for Minister Ellis. So just to clarify, these 51 positions, they are newly created positions within the Sheriff's Department. You're not taking positions from elsewhere in the province and moving them to the border?
That's more of an operational question, I think, for the chief, but maybe I'll have the chief do that. Thanks.
Yes, they are new positions, and obviously the recruitment will be from within the Sheriff's branch, primarily Highway Patrol and Fish and Wildlife Enforcement Services.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess this would be for the minister.
Sure.
Large swaths of private land along the border. How do you patrol that land without accessing it, or do you get permission from the landowners? How do you handle that private land when it comes to patrolling the border?
Well, I think that's an operational question again, and this is sort of. I would just say this. Look, I think regardless of who you are, I think most people understand the importance of border security. I think most people understand the concerns regarding illegal drugs, illegal guns, and the concern regarding human trafficking. So certainly, in that particular hypothetical scenario, I would say I would hope that we're going to work very collaboratively with private property owners. But make no mistake, our friends in law enforcement will abide by the law.
And perfect. That'll conclude today's press conference. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you so much.